I never thought my 30th birthday would feel like the moment the world decided to unravel itself in slow motion. The sun had barely crested over the rolling hills outside our village, spilling its golden light across the quiet streets, when the bell above the door tinkled and a stranger stepped inside the little restaurant where I was sitting with my parents. His coat was heavy, dark, and somehow out of place in the early spring warmth. He moved with an ease that made my skin prickle, a stranger who seemed both harmless and terrifying at once. I remember the way my parents froze. Sarah's hand tightened around her coffee cup as if she could anchor herself to the ordinary, to the mundane, while David's jaw clenched with that subtle tremor that I now recognize as fear masking something much deeper. The man handed me an envelope, thick, off-white, with no markings except for a single word scrawled across the front in looping handwriting I didn't recognize. For Leo. That's me. My name. Everything else in the room seemed to pause. Even the faint clinking of cutlery against porcelain, even the low murmur of the chef in the back, faded into silence. I could feel my pulse in my temples. What is this? I asked, my voice a brittle echo of calm I was trying desperately to summon. David snatched the envelope out of my hands before I could open it. He ripped it apart with a force that startled everyone. Paper tore with a crack that sounded like bones snapping. "Don't you dare touch that," he said, his voice low but tight, suffocating the air around us. Sarah looked at him, wide-eyed, and for a moment, I thought she might collapse. Her lips quivered, but no words came out. The stranger just smiled, a quiet, almost gentle smile that made my stomach knot. "Your real mother is outside," he said. And then, without another word, he turned and left as silently as he had come, leaving behind a trail of questions that burned hotter than the morning sun. I don't remember walking outside. Or maybe I do, and I've chosen to block the memory into fragments so it doesn't overwhelm me. The parking lot was empty except for a solitary figure standing near the edge, framed by the shade of a sprawling oak tree. Her hair caught the sunlight in a way that made it look almost like molten copper. Tia Vatic. She was impossibly real, impossibly there. I felt my legs give way under me, though I was standing perfectly still. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. She didn't speak at first. She just looked at me, her eyes heavy with a mix of sorrow and relief. And then she said it, words that broke something inside me, and rearranged it into shapes I hadn't known existed. "Leo, I've waited a long time to meet you." I froze. My mind was spinning. Waited? Who are you? How do you know my name? My voice cracked like dry wood. "I am your mother," she said, and the simplicity of the statement was devastating. Just those 4 words, but they carried a weight so dense I could hardly breathe. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, the safety of the world I grew up in, shattered. I wanted to scream at my parents. I wanted to demand explanations. But David and Sarah looked as though they were made of glass, fragile, waiting to shatter themselves. I could read the panic in their eyes, the stories they had carefully constructed for decades, the secrets they thought were buried so deep, now rising to the surface like water through a crack in a dam. And then there were the neighbors. Mr. Harrison, with his ever-watchful gaze, and Mrs. Clow, who had always been nosy in the way that small-town curiosity can be both benign and cruel. They were all there now, drawn to the chaos, drawn to the aura of something monumental about to be revealed. I could feel their stares, their whispers grazing the edges of my awareness. What did they know? Had they suspected all along? Taya took a step closer. She didn't touch me, but the air between us felt like it was vibrating. "There are things you need to know about your past, Leo," she said. Her voice was calm, patient, and yet every word felt like a hammer on my ribs. "Things about your birth, about the choices people made for you, decisions that were never yours to make. And that's when it hit me. All the little inconsistencies I had noticed over the years. The whispered arguments between my parents. The way David avoided certain questions about my childhood. The stories that never quite aligned with the truth. Everything. Every minor detail I had brushed aside, every fleeting suspicion I had buried deep, was converging into this impossible, terrifying, undeniable reality. I wanted answers, but I was terrified of what those answers might cost me. My sense of self, my understanding of love and family, everything was suddenly negotiable. And at the same time, I couldn't tear my eyes away from her. The woman claiming to be my mother, Tia Vatic. In that moment, I realized something fundamental. Life, as I had known it, was a fragile illusion. And today, on my 30th birthday, that illusion was being stripped away, piece by piece, leaving me raw, exposed, and utterly unprepared for the storm that was about to descend. The stranger's envelope, the torn birth certificate, the revelation of Tia. It was only the beginning. I could sense it, deep in my bones, like a tremor that had started far beneath the surface and was now creeping toward me, inevitable and unstoppable. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at her. Minutes, hours. It felt like time had collapsed into a single, suffocating second. David and Sarah hovered nearby, their faces masks of guilt and fear. And I knew, with a certainty that terrified me, that nothing would ever be the same again. I couldn't move. I couldn't. Even as Tia took another step closer, her presence seemed to push the air out of the world around me. I could feel every eye in the parking lot, every whisper that hadn't been said but was hanging heavy in the space between us. Mr. Harrison appeared then, his stooped frame approaching slowly, like he was carrying the weight of decades of secrets. I've known him all my life, or at least I thought I had. He's the type of man who notices everything, even things that aren't there, and for once, I felt exposed under his gaze. "Leo," he said, voice rough like gravel but calm, "you need to understand. Some truths, when revealed too fast, can break a man." I wanted to tell him to shut up, to walk away, but my legs refused to obey. Words wouldn't come. My throat was dry, my mind spinning. The reality that my life had been built on a lie, or at least a very selective truth, was pressing down on me, suffocating me. Mrs. Clow appeared then, flitting toward us like a bird with sharp eyes and sharper questions. "Oh, my goodness, David, Sarah, what is happening here?" she said, her voice carrying across the lot in a way that made Tia and me both flinch. Chloe has always loved drama, and she has always loved being first to know things no one else does. But today she seemed genuinely unsettled, as if even she could sense the gravity of the moment. Tia finally spoke again, and her voice carried a weight I could feel pressing against my chest. "Leo, I don't have time for small talk. I've waited for this moment for 3 decades. There are choices made for you, things taken from you, that I need to explain." David and Sarah tried to interject, but their voices were small against the magnitude of her calm certainty. David's hands shook slightly as he adjusted his tie. Sarah's eyes were wet, but stubbornly refusing to fall into tears. I watched them, my parents, the people I thought I knew entirely, suddenly reduced to fragments of themselves, caught between fear, shame, and the impossible truth of my birth. "I was young," Tia continued, her gaze never leaving mine. "I was forced to give you up. Circumstances, people, decisions beyond my control. But every day since, I've carried you in my heart. Every day, wondering if you ever knew." I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to hurl every accusation and question I'd ever held inside. But when I opened my mouth, no words came out. I was too aware of Mr. Harrison watching me, Mrs. Clow's inquisitive stare, my parents' helpless expressions. and the strange, impossible reality that the world I knew, the small, predictable village, the quiet certainty of family, was no more. Tia's next words hit me like a physical blow. "Your name at birth is not Leo Miller." The words hung in the air like smoke. Not Leo Miller. My stomach twisted. My world tilted. Every certainty I'd carried, every understanding of identity and belonging, began to crumple. Mrs. Clow gasped audibly. But your parents, they never told." She cut herself off, realizing that some truths are too big for polite society. David's face contorted, his jaw tight. "It was necessary," he muttered, almost to himself, almost a plea to the world to understand that lies, no matter how cruel, were meant to protect. But I knew then that protection had come at the highest possible cost. My trust, my clarity, my sense of self. Tia reached into a bag slung over her shoulder and pulled out a stack of papers. Birth certificates, legal documents, photographs that made my knees go weak. "You deserve to know, Leo," she said. "And I won't leave until you do." Time stretched, elongated, and oppressive. I realized with a strange clarity that the people around me, neighbors, parents, even the stranger who had left that envelope, had all been actors in a story that was not mine to write. And now finally, I was being handed the pen. Mr. Harrison stepped forward again. "Sometimes, knowing is heavier than not knowing," he said. His voice had the calm of experience, but even he seemed unsure whether I would be able to carry it. I wanted to run. To escape. But where could I go? My village, my home, the streets I had walked 1,000 times, all of it now felt like a stage set for a story I hadn't auditioned for. Tia knelt slightly, bringing herself closer to my level. Her eyes were pools of something I couldn't name: love, regret, hope. "Leo, I can't reclaim the past. I can't undo what was done. But I can give you the truth, and from there, you can decide what your future holds." I wanted to ask everything at once. Why? How? Who? But all that escaped my lips was a single broken word. Why? Her sigh was quiet but filled with decades of sorrow. "Because it had to be this way," she said, almost whispering. "Because I couldn't save you then, but I can try to make amends now." And in that moment, the sun seemed to rise higher, cutting through the shadows in the lot, but it did nothing to lighten the weight pressing on my chest. I realized that nothing, no explanation, no document, no confrontation, could prepare me for the revelations that were still coming. I looked at my parents, at Mr. Harrison, at Mrs. Clow, and finally back at Tia. I realized with a shocking clarity that the next steps would not just redefine my family, they would redefine me. I stepped back, trying to distance myself from the weight of Tia's presence, but it was impossible. Every step I took, the gravel beneath my shoes seemed to whisper reminders. Every lie, every secret, every carefully constructed story I had grown up believing was gone. And with it, I realized so was the certainty of who I was, or who I thought I was. Tia's hands trembled slightly as she laid more documents on the hood of my parents' car. Each one was like a shard of glass, cutting deeper into my understanding of my life. There were medical records, letters I had never received, photographs of a child who looked almost exactly like me, but was named differently, someone I had been, but also someone I had never truly been allowed to know. David's voice cracked, almost breaking. "Leo, we thought we were protecting you." I thought. He stopped, as if words themselves were traitors. I wanted to scream at him, to throw all of this back into his face, but my body refused. My legs felt cemented to the ground. My throat was a desert, dry and barren. Sarah stepped forward, her hand outstretched as though I could somehow accept her touch and reconcile the impossibility of what had just happened. "Leo," she said softly, "everything we did, we did for you. I know it may not seem like it now, but her voice faltered. She could not finish. And I realized then that my parents, too, were prisoners of a truth they had chosen not to tell. Mrs. Clow had edged closer, her curiosity now tinged with something darker, a sense of responsibility to bear witness. I can't believe this," she whispered. "I never imagined." Her voice trailed off. Clove has always loved drama, but this was beyond any story she had ever anticipated. She was witnessing history, and it was my history, my life unraveling piece by piece in front of her. Mr. Harrison stood silently, arms crossed, observing with a strange combination of detachment and concern. I could almost hear the wheels turning behind his eyes. He had seen this before, not the specifics, but the pattern. Secrets buried too deep, truths revealed too late, and the inevitable reckoning when a life had been built on foundations that were never real. Tia finally spoke, her voice firm but trembling just slightly at the edges. "Leo, you have the right to be angry. You have the right to hate us for what we've done, or for what we've left undone. But you also have the right to know. And knowing, as painful as it is the first step toward understanding who you are and who you can become." I wanted to shout at her. I wanted to throw the papers into the air and watch them scatter like the fragments of my life. I wanted to demand answers. Every answer, every secret, every lie unspooled into the harsh light of day. But instead, I stood there, frozen, overwhelmed, powerless. "Leo," Tia continued, her eyes locked on mine, "there's so much more you need to know. I've spent years piecing together everything that was hidden from you. There are people who lied, people who conspired, and people who thought they knew what was best for you. But now you get to see it all." I felt a tremor run through me, not of fear exactly, but of anticipation, dread, and something else, something harder to name. It was the first time in my life that I realized I was not just a passenger in my story. I was the driver. And yet, the road ahead was shrouded in fog, and I could not see the turns or the obstacles that awaited. David stepped closer, almost pleading. "Leo, please, try to understand. It was never about abandoning you." "We made mistakes, yes, but..." "No," I interrupted, my voice stronger than I expected. "It was about hiding, about control, about fear. You were afraid of what would happen if I knew the truth. But that fear has cost me everything." Tia's hand brushed mine as she handed me a thick envelope. "Open it," she said softly. "Everything you've ever wanted to know is in here. Names, places, the reasons why." I hesitated, my heart hammering in my chest. The envelope was heavier than it looked. Perhaps it was the weight of decades of secrets. Perhaps it was the weight of my own life, waiting to be reclaimed. Mrs. Clow leaned in, whispering almost to herself, "I can't imagine being in his shoes." But I wasn't interested in her empathy. I wasn't interested in anyone's judgment. I wanted truth. Raw, brutal, undeniable truth. I tore the envelope open. The papers inside smelled faintly of old ink and dust. As I began to read, my stomach twisted, my hands shook, and my mind raced. The story that had been my life, David, Sarah, every mundane moment of my childhood, was suddenly revealed to be something else entirely. A lie, a carefully curated illusion, a shadow cast over the real story of who I was. Tia watched me closely, her eyes never leaving mine. "I know this is a lot," she said, almost apologetically. "But it's the beginning, Leo. The beginning of understanding everything. And yes, it will hurt. It will make you question everything you thought was true. But it's necessary." I swallowed hard, feeling the first real crack in my armor. My parents, once untouchable in my mind, were suddenly flawed, human, and terrifyingly mortal. Mr. Harrison's eyes seemed to pierce right through me, seeing all the questions I hadn't dared to ask. And Mrs. Clow, well, she was there, observing, cataloging every reaction as though she were taking notes for some invisible newspaper that only existed in her mind. And then as I read, I realized there was no turning back. I could not unsee, unhear, or unread what was in those pages. My life, as I had known it, was gone, and in its place, something terrifying and beautiful had emerged. The raw, unfiltered truth. I couldn't stop reading. Every word, every line felt like a hammer striking the foundation of my world. Tia had handed me the pieces of a puzzle I didn't know existed, and now that I had them, there was no way to put them back into the box neatly. No, the pieces demanded to be spread out across the table of reality, glaring at me with questions I had no answers for. The first revelation hit me like a thunderclap. My life, everything I thought I had known about my parents, was layered with lies so intricate that even the smallest crack in their story revealed a hidden truth underneath. David Miller, my father, stern, meticulous, the man I had always looked up to, was hiding decisions that shaped my life without my consent. And Sarah, my mother, gentle and nurturing, she had been complicit in keeping me in the dark. I wanted to scream at them, demand they explain themselves, but my voice had been stolen by shock. Tia leaned against the car, calm but insistent. "Leo, your parents were trying to protect you in their own way, but protection doesn't mean honesty. You need to see it all." Her eyes held an intensity that made me shiver. "You're old enough now. You need to face what they withheld from you." I glanced at David, and for the first time, I saw the fear behind his eyes, the fear of a son who now questioned everything, who no longer blindly accepted his authority. "Leo," he said, voice shaking, "I thought you would never understand." "Understand?" I echoed, bitter and incredulous. "Understand that you spent decades shaping my life around secrets and lies. That I trusted you with every thought, every emotion, every dream, and you decided I wasn't ready to know the truth. How could you?" Sarah reached out, trembling. "Leo, we wanted to protect you from the chaos. We didn't realize it would." "It would what?" I cut in sharply. "Destroy me. Change everything I thought about who I am. Because that's exactly what it did." The wind picked up, rustling the leaves and whispering like ghosts through the old oaks around the property. It felt as if the world itself was conspiring with the revelation, urging me to look deeper, to not stop at the surface of the letters and photographs in front of me. Mr. Harrison stepped forward, breaking his silence. "Secrets have a weight, Leo. Some can be carried, some crush you. It's not your fault, but the burden now is yours." His words were calm, but beneath them was an undeniable truth. I had inherited responsibility, not just for understanding my parents' choices, but for deciding what I would do with the truth. And then there was Mrs. Clow, whose eyes had never left me. "Leo, you're seeing the world differently now. But remember, the story isn't just about betrayal or lies. It's about power. About who gets to control narratives and who doesn't. You control yours now." I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt before. Clarity. Maybe even a hint of empowerment. I could feel the adrenaline in my veins, a pulse that shouted for action. For the first time, I realized that the truth wasn't just information. It was ammunition. And I needed to decide how to use it. Tia handed me another envelope, smaller this time, but even heavier with implication. "These are letters from your biological mother. She's been trying to reach you for years. She wanted you to know her, even if your parents wouldn't allow it." My hands shook as I opened it. The handwriting was elegant, flowing, alive in a way that made my pulse quicken. Each word was carefully chosen, each sentence a bridge to a life I had never been allowed to touch. And yet it wasn't just a bridge. It was a mirror, reflecting a version of myself I had never known. David tried to interject. "Leo, you have to understand." "No, Dad," I said, cutting him off with a sharpness I didn't know I possessed. "I understand perfectly. I understand that you lied, that you manipulated, that you controlled. And I understand that I have the right to decide what comes next. But first, I need to know everything. No more omissions, no more secrets." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Leo, I'm sorry. I didn't know." "Sorry doesn't change the past," I said, feeling the cold clarity of reality settling around me. "But it does give me a choice for the future. And that choice begins with understanding everything, including the parts you tried to hide from me." Tia nodded approvingly. "Good, because there's more. Much more. And you need to be ready, Leo. Once you know it, you can't unknow it." I looked at the pile of envelopes, papers, and photographs, each piece a revelation, a confrontation, a key to doors I didn't even know existed. My mind raced, a storm of questions and possibilities. But for the first time, I felt something else. Determination. I would face this truth, no matter how raw, no matter how painful. Because my life, my identity, my very existence deserved nothing less. And in that moment, I knew one undeniable fact. Everything was about to change. I stared at the letters in my hands like they were relics from a world I wasn't allowed to visit. Each line, each carefully penned word, carried a weight I could feel pressing against my chest. Tia was watching me closely, her expression unreadable, but I knew she expected me to react. To feel something real. And I did. But it wasn't the anger I expected. It was curiosity, fierce and unrelenting. The first letter began simply enough, her handwriting elegant, almost meticulous. "Dear Leo, if you are reading this, it means you've finally been told the truth." My hands shook as I continued. "I never stopped thinking about you. Every year, every birthday, every milestone, I imagined the man you would become. I hoped one day you would have the chance to know me, not as a stranger, but as the mother who always loved you, even when circumstances prevented me from being there." I felt the first sting of tears, but I swallowed it back. Not because I wanted to hide them, but because I wanted to understand first. Understanding had to come before emotion. Otherwise, the storm would consume me before I even knew the scope of what I was facing. David and Sarah lingered in the background, silent now, as if they had exhausted every argument, every justification. Mr. Harrison leaned against the porch railing, observing me with the patience of someone who had seen truths like this unravel lives before. "It's always a shock," he murmured, almost to himself. "Finding out that the foundation you trusted was built on omissions and choices made without your consent." I read on. The letters painted a picture of a life parallel to mine, a life where my mother had tried, failed, been silenced. I could almost see her moving through the shadows of my childhood, leaving breadcrumbs of love I never realized existed. Every photograph, every scrap of paper, every letter was a confession and a plea wrapped together. Tia finally spoke, her voice breaking the heavy silence. "Leo, you have to decide what to do with this. Do you confront them, accept it quietly, or do you let it guide your next steps?" Her words were a challenge, not a suggestion. I felt my pulse accelerate. I had spent 30 years living in a house where everything felt safe, predictable. But safety is an illusion when the truth is hidden beneath layers of control and fear. Turn to David. "Dad, why? Why not tell me? Was it fear? Was it shame? Or did you think I wasn't ready?" He swallowed hard. "Leo, Save it, I said. My voice was sharp, steady, and carried an authority I didn't know I possessed. I don't need excuses. I need answers. Every detail, every choice, every reason you thought it was better to leave me in the dark. And then I'll decide how to move forward. Sarah stepped closer, trembling. Leo, please, understand that we loved you in the only way we knew how. I understand enough, I replied. I understand that love isn't just about protection. It's also about honesty. And until I have that, I can't forgive. Not yet, maybe not ever, but I can start making choices for myself. Mr. Harrison's voice, calm and deliberate, broke in. Leo, the hardest part isn't learning the truth. It's deciding what you will do with it. You can let it destroy you, or you can let it empower you. The choice is yours. I clutched the letters, my eyes scanning the room. Mrs. Clow had joined us now, her gaze steady, almost piercing. You're at the threshold, she said softly. Once you step through, there's no turning back, but you will know yourself. You will see your life clearly for the first time. And I felt it, the truth settling like a stone in my chest. Heavy, undeniable, yet strangely liberating. The storm of revelations was only beginning, and I could feel the waves crashing against the shores of my identity. But for the first time in years, I felt awake, alert, ready, because I knew, without question, that nothing would ever be the same again. The night air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the world around me had shifted on its axis. Every sound, the creak of the porch boards, the distant bark of a dog, the rustle of leaves in the wind, felt amplified, like the universe was holding its breath, waiting for me to act. I clutched the letters tighter, rereading a passage where my mother wrote about the day she tried to see me as a child. The words were simple, but the weight behind them was enormous. I was just outside your window, Leo. I wanted to call your name, to reach you, but I was stopped. I was powerless. Powerless. That word rang in my ears, echoing against the walls of my mind. All those years, I thought my life had been shaped by choice, by chance, by normalcy. But it had been curated, orchestrated, and I was only now beginning to see the puppeteer's strings. David and Sarah remained silent, but I could feel the tension radiating off them. They weren't just hiding truths. They were protecting a carefully constructed world. And now that world was crumbling, piece by piece, under the weight of letters and confessions that had finally found their way to me. Tia stepped closer again, her presence calm yet intense. Leo, she said softly, you can't let anger guide you. The truth is heavy, yes, but it's also a gift. It gives you the chance to see clearly, to make decisions for yourself. For the first time, you can choose who you want to be, unshackled from the lies. I wanted to nod, to accept her words, but my heart still throbbed with confusion and frustration. The image of my childhood, once so familiar, was now fractured. Faces I had trusted, routines I had believed in, even the smallest gestures, all of it carried a new meaning now. Every smile from my parents, every story they told, every bedtime ritual, tainted with omission, with secrecy. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat from the porch swing, breaking my spiraling thoughts. Leo, every generation has secrets, he said. Every family carries them. But the measure of a person isn't what they are told. It's what they do once the truth is revealed. I looked at him, feeling the truth of his words deep in my chest. I had been given a choice, to crumble under the revelation or to rise, to confront, to reclaim my life in the light of honesty. And then my eyes fell on the last letter, the one that had been folded so carefully, almost reverently. It read, I can't undo the past. I can't reclaim lost time. But if you are willing, Leo, I want to be part of your present. I want to be part of your life. Not to replace anyone, not to erase what has happened, but to finally stand beside you as the mother I always was in spirit." The words burned through me like fire and ice simultaneously. Relief, confusion, hope, grief, they all collided inside my chest. I realized with a clarity I had never felt before that nothing would be simple. Nothing would ever be just black or white. And yet, amidst the chaos, I felt a strange pulse of determination. I would face this truth. I would confront my parents. I would speak to my mother. I would untangle the web of lies and choices and omissions that had shadowed my life. And I would do it on my own terms. Mrs. Clo's voice brought me back to the present, gentle yet probing. "Leo, remember this. The truth doesn't just set you free. It challenges you. But freedom is never without cost." I nodded, realizing she was right. Every step I took now would be irreversible. Every confrontation, every question, every demand for honesty would reshape not just my understanding of my parents, but of myself. And yet, I felt ready. Because for the first time, I wasn't just living in the story that others wrote for me. I was beginning to write my words. I woke up before sunrise, the sky a bruised purple, and for a moment, the quiet felt like a reprieve. But the calm didn't last long. My mind was a storm, swirling with questions I had no answers for, questions I wasn't even sure I wanted to ask. I could hear David moving in the kitchen downstairs. The familiar sounds, pots clanging, the hum of the coffee maker, once comforting, now felt like echoes from a life I had only partially lived. I paused at the top of the stairs, holding the letters close. Each one was a thread, a lifeline, pulling me toward truths that had been hidden for decades. I remembered Mr. Harrison's words from the porch the night before. The measure of a person isn't what they are told. It's what they do once the truth is revealed. I had been told nothing, or rather, everything I had been told was incomplete, curated, carefully filtered through the lens of secrecy. Now I had to decide what I would do. I found Sarah in the garden, kneeling in the soil, her hands covered in dirt as she tended to the roses. She didn't look up as I approached, and for a moment, I wondered if she even expected me to be awake this early. "Mom," I said, my voice low, uncertain, "I read your letters." She finally looked at me, her eyes brimming with emotion I couldn't quite read. Relief? Fear? Guilt? I wasn't sure. Maybe all of it. I didn't know how to tell you," she whispered. "I thought I was protecting you. Protecting me." The word hung in the air like a fragile promise. But I didn't feel protected. I felt betrayed, manipulated, and suddenly painfully aware of how carefully my life had been controlled. "I needed to know," I said, my voice shaking. "I needed to understand why." "Why now? Why after all these years?" Tia had followed me outside, standing silently at the edge of the garden. Her presence was steady, grounding me even as my world seemed to crack apart. "Leo," she said gently, "sometimes the truth isn't about timing. Sometimes it's about readiness. You were ready now. That's why it came to you." I took a deep breath, trying to absorb her words. It sounded right, but it didn't make the anger fade. It didn't erase the years of lies and omissions. I looked at the envelope I still clutched, the one that had started this chain of revelations. And then I thought of Mr. Harrison, rocking slowly on his porch, watching the sunrise. He had lived long enough to know that some truths are unbearable until you are strong enough to face them. Maybe I was strong enough now. I squared my shoulders and walked back into the house, ready to confront David. The first question that came to my lips was simple, yet it carried all the weight of my years. "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" David's face paled, and for a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he sighed, a long drawn-out exhale that seemed to carry the weight of decades. "I thought I was protecting you," he said, his voice heavy. "I thought it would hurt less if you never knew." But the truth doesn't hurt less when it's hidden. It only grows, festering beneath the surface, until one day it bursts into the open, demanding to be seen, demanding to be understood. I felt my heart pounding as I continued, asking questions I had never dared to ask before, pressing for answers I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. And yet, with every word, with every confrontation, I felt something shift inside me. A new power, a new clarity, a sense that finally, for the first time, my life could be mine to shape. Not someone else's version of it, but my own. Even as the shadows of secrets and lies stretched long across the walls of our house, I felt a strange hope. Because the moment you face the truth, no matter how painful, is the moment you start to truly live. The day stretched long, but the house felt heavier than ever. Every corner seemed to whisper secrets, every shadow a silent witness to stories I had never known. I couldn't escape the feeling that I was walking through a museum of my own life, one curated by lies and omissions. I found Mrs. Clow sitting on her porch, sipping tea, her eyes narrowing as she noticed me coming. She had always been curious, maybe too curious, but today her gaze seemed sharper, almost piercing, as if she could see the truth dangling around my neck like a noose. "Leo," she said, voice soft but firm, "you're carrying a lot. Don't let it crush you before you even begin to understand it." Her words stung, because she was right. I was carrying it all: the letters, the envelope, the revelation of my real mother, and the years of questions I had been too afraid to ask. And yet, for the first time, I felt a glimmer of control. Maybe I could untangle this mess. Maybe I could understand it all without losing myself in the process. I wandered into the backyard, the letters pressed in my pocket, my mind replaying every moment from the past week. The stranger, the envelope, my parents' reactions, everything seemed orchestrated, yet random, as if fate itself had thrown me into this whirlwind to see how I would survive. Then I saw Tia at the edge of the yard, her silhouette framed by the setting sun. She didn't speak at first, she just watched me, her presence calm, steady. I knew she had her own secrets, and yet somehow, she felt like the only person who could anchor me in the storm of revelations. "Leo," she said finally, breaking the silence, "you can't fight this alone. You need to listen, not just to your parents, but to everyone who knows pieces of the story. The puzzle won't make sense until you see all the pieces." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. She was right. Mr. Harrison had always been the quiet observer, the one who saw what the rest of us ignored. Maybe it was time I went to him, asked the questions I had been too afraid to ask, demanded the answers that had been kept from me for so long. I walked down the lane toward his porch, each step heavier than the last. Mr. Harrison looked up from his rocking chair, his eyes twinkling, knowing, as if he had been expecting me all along. "Leo," he said, his voice raspy with age, but clear in intention, "you've reached the edge of the truth, but the fall won't kill you. You need to decide how deep you're willing to go." I hesitated, feeling the gravity of his words. The edge of the truth. That was exactly where I was. Every revelation about my parents, my real mother, the lies, the curated life, they were all pieces of a puzzle I had been blind to for 30 years. And now the puzzle was finally before me, messy and incomplete, demanding to be solved. "I'm ready," I said, more to myself than to him. "I need to know everything. No more omissions. No more half-truths. I need the whole story." Mr. Harrison nodded slowly, rocking back in his chair. "Then listen well, Leo. The story begins before you were ever born, and it won't be easy to hear." I swallowed hard, my hands trembling. This was it, the moment where my life shifted from ignorance to awareness, from shadow to light. I didn't know if I was ready for the consequences, But I knew one thing. I could no longer remain a passive player in the story of my own life. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in blood-red hues, I felt the first flicker of resolve. Whatever truths awaited me, whatever secrets were buried, I was ready to face them. Because the longer you hide from the truth, the more it defines you without your consent. And I was done being defined by lies. I found myself standing in the kitchen, the air thick with the smell of stale bread and the faint aroma of Sarah's old perfume. David was at the counter, methodically slicing vegetables, his face calm as if nothing had changed in the past 30 years. But I knew better. I knew that beneath that composed exterior, storms had been brewing. "Dad," I said, voice low, almost hesitant, "we need to talk." About everything. He didn't look up. He kept cutting, each slice precise, controlled. "Leo, some things are better left buried," he murmured, as if the weight of unspoken secrets was already pressing against my chest. I shook my head. "No, not anymore. I need to know the truth about Mom, about me, about what's been hidden all these years." Sarah appeared from the pantry, her hands trembling, eyes wide. "Leo, it's not what you think." Her voice cracked, the practiced calm from decades of control giving way to vulnerability. "We did what we had to do. We protected you." "Protected me?" I echoed, incredulous. "From what, Mom?" "From the truth. From myself." She swallowed, struggling to find words. "Your life, it would have been complicated. Painful. We wanted to give you a normal childhood, even if it meant keeping some things from you." Normal. That word burned in my mouth. My entire life had been curated, shaped, edited, like some carefully written script where I didn't get to choose my lines. And now, the envelope, the stranger, the revelation, it all crashed down on me like a flood. "I deserve the truth," I said, my voice rising. "I'm 30 years old, and I deserve to know who I really am. Who my real mother is. Why she's been kept away. Why you lied." David finally looked up, and for the first time in my life, I saw the cracks in his armor. His eyes were tired, haunted, as if the weight of decades of secrecy had been pressing him down. "Leo, it wasn't easy for us," he admitted, voice low. "Your real mother, she wasn't ready. She had her reasons. We thought we were doing the right thing." Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "Doing the right thing? You tore my life apart to fit your version of right. You robbed me of knowing my own story. And for what?" Sarah's hands fell to her sides. "We thought we were protecting you. From her choices, from the chaos, from mistakes we knew she'd made. We wanted you safe. We wanted you happy." But I wasn't happy. I was furious, betrayed, and yet I couldn't help the strange pull of curiosity that gnawed at my chest. Who was she really? The mother I had never known. The woman who had a name I had only seen on a ripped-up piece of paper. "Where is she?" I asked, voice trembling. "Where is my real mother?" David hesitated, then nodded toward the back door. "She's outside. She's been waiting." I froze, my mind spun. Outside, waiting, for me. All the years of absence, all the unanswered questions, and now, she was here. After 30 years. After decades of controlled narratives, lies and omissions, my real mother was waiting, and I had to decide if I was ready to face her. The kitchen felt smaller, the walls pressing in, as I took a step toward the door. Every fiber of me wanted to turn away, to stay in the world I knew, the world of curated lies. But something deeper, a hunger I had never understood, pulled me forward. I opened the door, and there she was. My real mother, the stranger who had become real, the figure from a life I had only glimpsed through scraps of paper, half-truths, and whispered stories. And in that instant, everything changed. For the first time, I realized that life wasn't just about the truths you were told. It was about the courage to face the ones you had been denied. I stepped onto the porch, my heart hammering like a drum in a war I wasn't prepared for. The sunlight caught her hair, the same shade I'd imagined in my dreams, in the stories I pieced together from fragments of a life that wasn't mine. She smiled, not the polite smile of a stranger, but a smile that carried decades of longing, regret, and love. "Leo," she said softly, her voice trembling just enough to make it real. "I've waited so long to meet you. I didn't know what to do." My body wanted to freeze in disbelief. My mind screamed questions I couldn't formulate. "Why? Why now?" I asked, my throat tight. "Why after 30 years?" She took a step closer, and the air between us seemed to hum with the weight of untold years. "I wasn't ready before. There were circumstances, complications I can't explain fully. But I never stopped thinking about you, never stopped hoping for this day." David and Sarah appeared behind me, their expressions a mixture of resignation and guilt. I realized that the two worlds, the one I had been given and the one I had been denied, were colliding right here, right now. I looked at her, Tia Vatic. The name had sounded foreign, almost mythical, but now she was real. Flesh and blood. And she was me, in a way I had never allowed myself to admit. I don't even know where to start," I said, voice shaking. "Everything I thought I knew, it's all been a lie. You were out there, waiting, and I lived a life that wasn't mine." She reached for my hand, and for the first time, I felt the warmth I had been missing my entire life. "I know it's a lot, Leo. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But I'm here now, and I want to make this right, if you'll let me." The world felt heavy and light at the same time. I could feel the years pressing on me, the gaps, the absence, the lies, but also the strange thrill of possibility. I had been given a chance to reclaim a piece of myself that I never knew existed. Can we start over?" I whispered, uncertain, afraid to hope. Her eyes glistened. "Yes, but it will take time, and patience. And a willingness to forgive, not just me, but them, and yourself." I glanced at David and Sarah. Their faces were taut with emotion, no longer the rigid masks of control. They had tried to shield me, to protect me from a version of life they feared I couldn't handle. But the truth, I realized, was stronger than their fear. Turning back to Tia, I took a deep breath. "I don't know if I can forgive everything yet, but I want to try. I want to know you. I want to understand why things happened the way they did." She smiled again, a soft, sad, beautiful smile. "That's all I've ever wanted, Leo. That's all I've ever hoped for." For the first time, the distance of 30 years collapsed. I wasn't a child anymore. I wasn't just a son shaped by lies. I was Leo Miller, finally standing face to face with the woman who gave me life, the woman who had been waiting all these years. And in that moment, I realized something profound. The truth doesn't erase the past, but it has the power to change the future, to heal wounds, to create something real where once there were only shadows. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know how our relationship would unfold, or how the revelations of the past would ripple through our lives. But I knew one thing: this was my story now. My choice. My chance to reclaim a life that had been waiting for me all along. As we stood there, hands barely touching, the wind carrying the scent of spring and possibility, I felt a flicker of hope. The kind that only comes when a lifetime of questions finally meets the courage to ask them. And for the first time in 30 years, I felt whole. Subscribe to the channel and stay with us, and share your thoughts in the comments.